Ladies and gentlemen, Larry Snowden here, and I'm sitting next to J. Elvis Weinstein, originally known as Dr. Lawrence Earnhardt. How do I pronounce that?
It was Earhart.
Earhart. Dr. Lawrence Earhart from Mystery Science 3000. And now he is also on Cinematic Titanic, and we're very proud to have him here today. How are you today, sir?
I'm great. Glad to be here.
All right. Now, one of the things, I want to talk a little bit about your beginning, because I'm actually fascinated by this. Ladies and gentlemen, Larry Snowden here, and I'm sitting next to J. Elvis Weinstein, originally known as Dr. Lawrence Earnhardt. How do I pronounce that?
It was Earhart.
Earhart. Dr. Lawrence Earhart from Mystery Science 3000. And now he is also on Cinematic Titanic, and we're very proud to have him here today. How are you today, sir?
I'm great. Glad to be here.
All right. Now, one of the things, I want to talk a little bit about your beginning, because I'm actually fascinated by this. You, like most of the rest of the cast of MST3K, started out as a stand-up comedian, but you started so young. I mean, how old were you, and what made you decide that comedy was the way to go for you?
I was 15 when I started doing stand-up in Minneapolis, and I never had a grand plan. A friend of mine decided he was going to do an open stage night in Minneapolis, and I decided, all right, I'll tag along. And I wrote an act like a couple of hours before I went on stage, and by the end of the night, I knew that was my thing.
Well, being 15 years old, I believe you said, was it hard to get gigs? I mean, you really can't walk into a lot of clubs nowadays under 18.
Right. Well, luckily the place I actually started didn't have a liquor license, so I was allowed to perform there underage. But by the time I was 16, I was working all over the city and all over the Midwest doing in bars, and I didn't really look my age, and I didn't talk about it on stage. So mostly I just sort of skated by, but I had become enough of an established part of the Minneapolis comic community that people just sort of let me roll.
So you were basically 21 when you were 15.
Pretty much.
All right, I understand that. I can relate to that. How did you get the gig on MST3K when it started at KTMA?
Well, a bunch of stand-ups in town, including Trace and eventually Joel Hodgson. We had a weekly writing group where we would just sort of dump our stand-up notebooks on each other and see if anyone had any ideas for a funny tagline or a funny way to go with a premise or a joke. And so I knew Joel already. Joel, right when I started doing stand-up, Joel sort of came back from his self-imposed hiatus and taught a class in creativity and stand-up, and I enrolled in that because I was a fan of Joel's from his stand-up career.
Right.
And so Joel and I had built a relationship over those couple of years, and then he joined that writing group, and then one day after the writing group, he just kind of pulled Trace and I aside and said, hey, I'm doing this thing tomorrow, do you want to run puppets for me? And that was kind of the beginning of it.
And that just kind of took off from there.
Yeah.
Now, you were originally 3 characters on the show. I mean, besides Dr. Lawrence wow, I'm going to learn to not pronounce that sometime today. You were also Tom Servo, which a lot of people knew, but not a lot of people knew that you were also Gypsy at the beginning.
I was. I created Tom Servo and Gypsy as characters, and I even was Crow once on the local TV show when Trace was out of town. I threw in a few Crow lines. Yeah.
Oh wow! Okay, you're just an all-about man about town, aren't you?
That's right. But when we moved to national TV, Jim Mallon took the Gypsy puppet.
Was that something that you relinquished happily, or is it just kind of like, I'm kind of close to that character, but okay?
I probably did. I don't remember specifically. I probably didn't relinquish it gladly, but it, in my memory, it was fine, and it allowed Servo and Gypsy to be in the same scene.
Well, you only lasted 1 year on Comedy Central before you decided to take off for greener pastures. Or did you ever watch other episodes later on and think, oh, there's somebody else doing the character now, and I miss that, or that voice doesn't really match what I think of the character?
No, I mean, the reality of it was sunk in immediately, really. So the thing that did strike me, actually, is how great Frank was and how great Frank and Trace were together. And, my chops as a comic actor at 17 weren't what I would, hope, what I would want them to be now. So to see, the one thing that was clear to me is that Frank and Trace were a great comedy team, whereas Trace and I, we had some chemistry, but it really went up a notch with Frank in that role.
Well, but you seem to do all right for yourself after you left MST3K. I mean, you've got, at least writing credit-wise and stuff, you've got a head writer for later with Greg Kinnear, head writer on America's Funniest Videos. Oh, how did you get those gigs? First of all, I mean, what Who approached you, or did you approach somebody else going, "Hey, I can do this"?
Well, I mean, every gig was different. I mean, I moved to Los Angeles when I was 20, and I knew people who were already writing for television, and so it's a process of getting scripts to various people, sample material, and then getting an agent, and so every job had a sort of, sometimes it was just a job interview for a writing job, sometimes it was a friend was already on the show and they recommended me, so but pretty standard Hollywood channels. I got an agent and got gigs.
Well, the thing is when you were writing with MST3K and even with AFV, it's a weekly show. But when you were doing Later with Greg Kinnear, that's a nightly show.
Right.
Was there a huge change of writing styles on that? I mean, there's got to be more challenges doing a nightly show than there is a weekly show.
Well, it's very different. Doing a daily show there's a sort of factory job element to it, because you start writing it in the morning and you shoot it at the end of the day, and then it's nothing you can do,
Right.
So each day is a new show. There's not carryover from week to, there's no baggage of, when you're working on an episodic show, you have a bunch of episodes that are in various states of production, so there's a lot that you're sort of dragging along through the chain, whereas on a daily show, it's really like that day's show is what's important. Get it done, go home, don't take any of it home with you and you mentally, and then start again early the next morning.
When you were working on AFV, you also started working again with Trace.
I did.
Was there any trepidation with that, or did you always keep in contact and you were always friends, or?
No, we were actually kind of estranged for several years, and then when Trace moved to Los Angeles, he got in touch with me, and we chatted and worked out any old issues very quickly, and then I actually hired him for America's Funniest Home Videos because I was the head writer on the show. So
now you're back, and all the fans can see you on Cinematic Titanic now. How did this happen? How did you get back into movie riffing?
Well, before this happened, Trace and Joel and I had been talking about doing various projects together, and we went out and pitched a show together and stuff. And so we were already sort of in that mindset of kind of getting the band back together. Right. And then Joel actually came to me with the idea for Cinematic Titanic, and it was right at the time when the Writers Guild went on strike. So I had nothing else I even could do, so I was very up for it, and we shot one DVD and performed live shortly thereafter, and realized that we really like doing this, and we still have a thing doing it, and we just didn't stop, and it's been almost 5 years now.
Okay. Well, now that you're going out and you're doing this as a live show, and you do the meet and greets before or after the show, depending on where you are, how does it feel to have all these fans come up and remember you and enjoy what you're doing now?
It's really lovely. I mean, it's to think that, I certainly, I think, most of the fans, I'm sort of a secondary level fandom for them, I think.
For some people, yes.
And I'm not saying that's self-deprecating. It's just the reality. Most people didn't see the show when I was even on it, and came in season 3, or when as Comedy Channel became wider distributed, more people saw the show. But they probably first got acquainted with it with Kevin as Servo and Frank as TV's Frank, and but I'm really proud that I was part of starting this thing, and that we made this thing that means so much to so many people, and that it lives 20-some years later in people's hearts, and now very much alive on stage in a slightly different form.
Well, if anybody wants to be able to get in contact with you through email or even postal mail, like a P.O. box, is there any way that people can reach out to you and say congratulations or thank you? Or
the best way is on Twitter at J. Elvis Weinstein, all one word. Okay. At Jelvis Weinstein, it reads.
Well, Mr. Weinstein, we really appreciate the time that you took to spend with us, and believe it or not, I appreciated your character.
Well, thank you.
I appreciated your writing.
I don't feel unappreciated.
Okay.
I just am realistic.
Yeah. Well, there you go. And we're looking forward to having a fun time tonight. And if you ever want to catch a show, you got to go to cinematictitanic.com, and you can learn more about what he's doing with them too. Indeed. But thank you so much for your time. We wish you great success.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Larry Stoney, J. Elvis Weinstein. One of us will be back.